It's time for the Ward Scott Files, hosted by John Martin. Join the Salty Dog and his captain, Ted Yoho. Search for the Ward Scott Files on Facebook, Vimeo, and over 30 audio platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Now here's your host, the Salty Dog, John Martin.
Well, good morning, Ted. How are you today?
Good, buddy. How you doing after this weekend? A lot of excitement?
Absolutely, and we'll get into some of that in just a moment. But welcome, everybody, to the Ted Yoho Show, hosted by John Martin, the Ward Scott Files. We're glad you could join us today.
The WSF Files.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing we got to talk about, since we're right here at the heart of Gator Country, we're broadcasting to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill in beautiful Celebration Point. And we would be remiss if we didn't say, how about them Gators going to the Final Four?
Hey, go Gators. You know, they're doing a great job making the area proud, the Gator Nation proud, and they're going to continue on with everybody's support and be the national champions. It'll be Titletown again.
Sounds like it. We got to bring it on home. So the Gators are in the Final Four. They play Auburn, I guess, Saturday. So two orange and blue teams go at each other.
That's
SEC,
right.
And I'm certainly people I think know where
It was really great the way they came
stand.
there. So they're behind 10 points and they came back, and nobody, a lot of people are like, well, they can't get back, and they did. The Gators came through, and we're proud of them.
The heart of a champion. Well, they said the same thing about Donald Trump, that he couldn't come back. And what did he say at his first speech to the joint session of Congress? We're back, baby. He said, we're back. But
was that when the other side stood up and clapped?
Yeah, stood up and wanted to run, I guess. But we had an interesting time, you and I, this weekend, because we participated, and I was live streaming, and you were there. This, I guess we'd call it a Tesla support demonstration in Gainesville at the new Tesla dealership. And there was, of course, some anti-Musk, anti-Trump, anti-Tesla people there as well. But and the live stream, if you haven't seen it, you can see it across all of our Facebook channels. I live streamed it on my old John Martin Talk site. And as of this morning, Ted, we had over 3,500 views of that.
That just shows you how people are connected and wanting to see what's going on. And I have to apologize for you, because you were up there, you were giving just real calm interviews, and you said everything was going great. But then there was this lightning rod that showed up.
What Ted's referring to is, I was there a little bit ahead of him, and I'd already been on the pro side, and I ventured across the street to the anti-Tesla, I would say anti-American side, but that's just my opinion. And it was going, I was doing my normal, what I call cheerful warrior, but warrior nonetheless. And Ted ventured over there, and they recognized you right off the bat, and they gave you a very special greeting, did they not?
They did, and you said it was kind of going downhill there. It's like my family says. They said a little bit of you goes a long way, so I guess that's true, huh?
Yeah, it was amazing how the one guy came up to you and you were talking to me and you said something about the truth, and he goes, imagine that, Ted Yoho speaking the truth. And he was, which the Ted I know has always spoken the truth, whether you liked what he had to say or not. But it was pretty amazing. So to me, Ted, as I say, I like to be a cheerful warrior, but a warrior nonetheless. And one of the feelings I had that coming out of that was a certain sense of sadness, because the way I look at it, I don't care who you're for politically. Life is too short in not to be happy. And most of the people out there, they're living the American dream. You could tell it wasn't like they were a bunch of like homeless folks out there. They living pretty good, and but they were sad and unhappy because Trump was in the White House. And I just don't get that aspect of it. It's one thing to totally disagree with him, but to actually be miserable yourself, I don't understand it.
Well, I saw hatred and anger is what I saw. And yeah, they're sad. I'm sure that's a part of that. And this is where you've got to come together as Americans. You can be hateful all you want, but what's that going to do to move this country forward? That goes back to what we were talking about last week with Ray Dalio, his commentary about this country is so separated ideologically that how do you heal that? And what we saw Saturday there was a big divide there. Very few people, you talk to some of those people, and they, you had an open discussion with them, and they were saying, well, I don't like this, and I wish this was different. But then there were people that didn't want to listen. They didn't want to hear anything. And you experienced that one guy that came up to me, and he didn't want to talk, and I said, well, give me a reason why, or give me an example. And he just says, I can't even talk to you. So, if people aren't willing to engage, you can't solve things.
Yeah, I was talking to one lady over there, and it really stood out to me. And there was a couple that did, but she, was probably, I'm just guessing, she was probably in her 70s, and you could tell by the way she was dressed and stuff that, and her mannerisms, that she's quite comfortable. I'm sure she's at bare minimum upper middle class. And I talked to her, and she literally told me that she was extremely unhappy in life. And I said, well, I told her what I just said earlier about life being too short. And she literally said, well, when the devil's fire is licking my legs, I can't be happy. And that's what I said about made me sad. I don't understand that because, the Biden administration certainly rubbed me the wrong way, but I still went fishing. I still enjoyed my life because I'm determined to go to enjoy my life no matter who's in the White House.
Well, we had a lot of people ask me that. And I says, one of the things that prompted me to run was when President Obama came in and he said, we're 5 days away from fundamentally transforming America. And we saw that 15, 16 years of transformation under him and the 4 years of Joe Biden. America couldn't stand any more transformational changes. From my perspective, if you're going to remain a constitutional republic, you've got to get back on course. And the way they were taking us was to Hugo Chavez's Venezuelan utopian, their dream, which is a disaster. And we've got, unfortunately, people that are elected to Congress that think that's the way this country should go. And it's really important because we've got an election coming up here tomorrow, April 1st, special election, District 6, Randy Fine versus another guy that's a very liberal person out of Putnam County. And then we have the 1st District where Matt Gaetz was.
And Mr. Petronas is running for that, right?
Yep, Jimmy Petronas is running for that. And these things do have an impact. And typically, these kind of elections, special elections, have low turnout. But the Democrats have put in $9 million in the one in District 6. And in District 1, I think it's about $6 million or $7 million. And so they are out to win this any way they can. And that's why it's important for people to, as you say, become educated, motivated, and activated. And we cannot afford to lose these. And let's make that happen so that we keep the majority. We can stay on track. A lot of times when people first make a change, like Trump is shaking it up a lot in D.C., and we all wanted that disruption up there to shake the government up. But when that is going on, and you're right in the beginning of it, it's uncomfortable. People need to look down the road of where this country will be, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. If we get our debt under control, how much more can we do in education and research and development and things like that?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Obama and the whole fundamentally change America thing. And, I'm not a negative Nanny, but at some level, we may have already crossed some lines. And I know that Dalio fella, Ray Dalio, we talked about on a show a week or two ago about, are we in a civil war now, so to speak, not a shooting one, but have we gotten to a point to where we've gone too far? And I think that there are some fundamental changes that have happened in America, and I'm hoping it's not too late.
Yeah, let's always hope it's not too late. We have to do whatever we can to come out of this peacefully. I mean, we've seen wars in the past. There's a lot of death and destruction, cost, disruption of life, lost lives, and things. It takes a long time to heal, and let's just hopefully that we can work together with people on both sides. And in fact, I'm doing a bipartisan interview April 10th down at the University of Central Florida on with a member from the Democrat side, Val Demings, talking about issues and how can we come together on these things. So It'll be interesting.
Well, we'll have to report some on that. But, when I was at that event Saturday, I'm talking about, if you're just tuning in, we did a live stream from the pro-Tesla versus anti-Tesla at the new Tesla dealership in Gainesville, Florida. But one of the things I left there really understanding, and you've mentioned this before, that there's a vast chasm between how they see the world and how you and I do. And to me, it's clear that they're not a majority. They're very vocal. They're not a majority, because if they were, Donald Trump would not have won. But what I fear, Ted, is that we just don't have much common ground to come to.
Well, that's what I saw. What I saw on the people on the other side of the road. I guess if I was standing facing north, I was on the right and they were on the left. There was just the anger and the hatred, and I didn't see that common ground coming together. And like you said, when you're that far divided, your hearing goes away, and they can't hear what we're trying to talk about. And it's the definition of where you want America to be. Do you want it to remain a constitutional republic? Excuse me. Or do you want to go down the socialist, communist, Marxist path? And that's the direction I personally feel, and a lot of other people feel, that this country is heading. Can we afford that? And is that the kind of future you want for your children and grandchildren, or the next generations to come? And if that does happen, what happens to that shining city on the hill that people migrate, put their lives and families at risk to get to this country because of opportunity and the freedoms that we have? Well,
just to show you how big the chasm, you mentioned children and grandchildren, which I get. I got 7 of them now, grandchildren.
You were prolific, huh? Yeah. You followed the Bible.
Well, at least my kids have been, certainly. But, the left, the hardcore left, they don't even want children.
Right.
And, you see it all the time. Remember their convention, the Democratic convention, they literally had a mobile, there were mobile food trucks maybe at the Republican convention, but there was mobile vasectomy and abortion clinics.
That's right,
at the Democratic convention. And it's just, they don't want children. It's so,
well, if they go down
that tells you a lot right there.
The transgender route, they won't have children.
Yeah, and, that's true. Maybe they'll go extinct that way, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, another example, and you brought this forward, and so I want to talk about it. An example happened over the weekend in Minnesota. And this story comes to you from Fox 9, Minnesota. Minnesota state workers threatened to retire early after a return to office order. So what's happening?
Isn't this crazy?
Yeah.
This is just mind-boggling. I had to send that to you.
So this is Mr. Walz, Governor Walz, Tampon Tim, they like to call him or whatever. He has now given out, I guess, an executive order.
We all have a handle we can go by, but that's one I don't think I'd want to have.
Tampon Tim, yeah. There you go.
Tampon Ted. No,
but
doesn't fit.
It doesn't me either.
I shouldn't say fit.
That's okay. I'll do all that crazy things, but I'll do that kind of stuff so you don't you can keep it on the high ground, Ted.
High ground.
When you go high, I'll go low.
Okay,
like,
good.
wasn't that what Michelle said or something like that?
Somebody like that.
But Tim Walz, Tampon Tim, has issued, I guess, an executive order in the state of Minnesota, ordering state workers to come back to work at least 50% of the time, not full time, but apparently since COVID, the state employees in Minnesota have been working from home, and they're just up in arms about
They're
this.
angry. They're mad. And, when you read the article, they're upset because it would disrupt their life. It would put undue burden on them. They would have to worry about childcare. Like, people that go to work every day and show up, they don't have to worry about these things. But yes, they do, and they do show up. So I just don't understand this. And this is what happens when you have a liberal progressive running a state like Minnesota. And I hate to even say that's where I was born, in Minnesota. But back then it was just, it was the heart of America. It was a rural area, just, farmers, and just people would walk down the street and say, hey, how you doing? Now it's like they just growl at you.
Well, you know what? It kind of reminded me of an old story of mine where I used to be a commercial fisherman, and I would go out on the boat for about a week at a time out in the Gulf of America now. And I would come home on Fridays because that's when I would sell my fish. And so I'd be home. I'd been out, in the heat and cold and whatever, staying up for 10, 15, 20 hours at a shot. And I'd come back, and about 1 o'clock that afternoon, I'd want to take a nap. Well, I was living with my dad at the time.
Big
and
Sid wasn't going to put up
Big
with
Sid
that.
could not. He knew I was working my behind off, but he could not stand to see me at 1 o'clock in the afternoon propped up in a lazy boy going to sleep. So I finally had to start going to the movies, Ted, just so I could get a nap.
I remember you telling me that story.
But he would not. He could not fathom that. And I say that to say that when you look at what these people are griping about, it's hard to fathom griping about the everyday challenges of life and expecting to be able to just work from home all the time. It's crazy.
Well, and they've been off since COVID. So that was what, January of 2021. And so they've been off of work, not having to go into the office for going on 5 years, I think it is, right?
Yeah,
4
but
years.
getting
4 years.
paid nonetheless.
Getting paid. Now they're asking them come back halftime. Come back to the office halftime, and it's just a sorry excuse. Americans should be better than that. I don't know when it became fashionable to be lazy. I don't want to say lazy because I'm sure they're doing their work, but not to do the things that you have to build a community, to build an industry, a nation, and we're not going to survive that way.
So let me just read a little bit from this article what they're peeved about. I'm being kind there. So upset state employees protested Walz's order that they return to office at least 50% of the time.
At least
50%. They said the order will make their lives more difficult. To go to work 50% of the time is going to make their lives more difficult. I mean, wow. I mean, right there, it's hard to. And I want to play you a short video of a much longer video that shows the state workers' concern. And this is one of the leaders of the union there. And I think it kind of shows the differences here. So let's play this video and we'll come right back and talk about it.
And your words align, because this action is eerily similar to the playbook that we're seeing in Washington, D.C. And we always need to center workers first. And so at this point, I would like to turn it over to the workers.
Well, there's a guy, he's the president of one of the government unions there representing the Minnesota state workers. And what really stood out to me in those comments, Ted, was he's basically saying that what's happening in the state of Minnesota, now this is ordered by Governor Tim Walz,
right,
that it's eerily, I think is the words he used, eerily similar to what's happening in Washington. I'm assuming referring to Doge and Donald J. Trump. So he's comparing Governor Walz to Donald J. Trump.
I can't follow that, because Walz is asking people that have been not coming to the office for the last 4 years to show up 50% of the time, whereas Doge is sending people home because of the government excess and the extra cost it costs. And how you can compare one to the other, I don't know, other than I guess he views them both as authoritarian. And you could look at it that way, but one is doing it because our nation needs that kind of relief. This one on Tim Walz's side is just like, how about just showing up half the time?
Yeah, just show up half the time and you're
Not
good.
asking too much
but
here.
they say it's way too difficult. But meanwhile, you might wonder, well, where is the governor? Where's Tampon Tim and all this? Well, he was actually out in Texas.
I was going to say he was on vacation.
He was out in Texas with Beto O'Rourke holding a big town hall meeting.
Oh, man.
And one of the things, it's about a 2-hour long meeting. If, punish yourself. Like I say, I do one of my public services. I watch stuff so you don't have to. But
Or if you have insomnia.
Yeah, but Tim is actually out there, and one of the things he apologizes to the young people in the audience. Now, keep in mind who Tim Walz is. He apologizes in there that old white guys are constantly disappointing us in this country. And last time I checked, he was some old white dude. Now, I can understand he's disappointed. But check out this statement here. This is what a longtime employee of
I'm going to look down at your computer so I can see it.
This is what a longtime employee with the Minnesota State Workers said. She said it's a very hard to process and figure out what that looks like, talking about coming back to work 50% of the time moving forward. The amount of money, check this out, the amount of money that I have to, this is what the state worker said, I have to plug in to figure out child care or transportation. Oh yeah, it's gut-wrenching. gut-wrenching to have to figure out how to get to work and how to pay for childcare. Whatever happened to my body, my choice? I mean, I think having children is a choice, right?
I think so. It's a blessing too.
But she's talking about the everyday challenges that I just assume most Americans go through going to work. But she's saying that for her to make that decision is gut-wrenching. It's just wow.
Well, the gravy train's over. And again, people don't realize what Trump is doing is what needs to be done to this country to get it back on a financial sound track. If he does not do this, all these programs will be cut. They won't be cut, they'll end. And you talk about chaos in this city or in this nation. People think they have it bad now, and I know some people do and they're struggling. But, sometimes we need a reality check and look at the blessings we have. And if you have a job to go to, that's a blessing.
Yeah, and we were talking at the beginning of the show about this chasm between, I guess if you want to divide it up to left and right, I don't really like totally dividing that up, but that's where we are. But this worker, she went on to say this, and this really just stands out to me, the choice she's going to have to make. She said, do I give up my position, talking about as a state worker, going back to work full time because I have to
halftime.
Yeah, because I have to, halftime, 50%, right. But I have to stay home. She said, but then I don't have an income, so is Governor Walz expecting me to go on assistance? So her choice in her mind is, if I have to go back to work 50% of the time, it's going to so inconvenience me that I may have to quit and get on the public dole. I mean, I just don't get that.
Well, it goes back to, just ideologies and doing the right thing. It goes back to biblical times. A man shall earn his bread by the sweat of his brow. That will never go out of favor. And the benefit and the satisfaction you get and gain from going out and working, earning that income, saying, you know what, I did good today. I deserve this paycheck. This is going to be good for my family. And it teaches a lesson to that generation they're trying to raise. And if they see you not working, the kids are going to say, why should I go to work?
Absolutely.
Mom and dad or mom did all right without going to work and the government took care of us. Do you really want the government deciding what you can and can't do? Because if you do, China is a good example, or Venezuela is a good example. We don't want that in America.
Well, to me, her attitude actually shows what is fundamentally changed in America, if that's the case.
Wow, think about that. Go back to John Kennedy when he said, that speech, ask not what your country can do for you, what can you do for your country? He'd be thrown out of office today if he were to say that. He'd be booed. They'd had epithets of him like they do Trump and Musk up there. It would be terrible. But that guy was a very popular president.
Well, the slogan now could be changed, not what instead of what you can do for your country to what's in it for me.
Or what more can you do for me?
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw this, but I saw a little clip this morning that one of the chairmen of the Democratic Party locally in Pennsylvania has called for Fetterman to resign because he's siding too much with the Republicans. I mean, when you start calling for John Fetterman, to resign, that kind of shows you.
The thing I like, I was just shocked that he got elected. Looking at him, I read about him. I knew he was more of a progressive liberal than my politics is. And I followed him. And when he started taking a stance, he goes, I'm not a puppet of any party. I'm here to represent my district. That kind of attitude shows that he can work on both sides of the aisle. But if you're a Democrat and you work on the other side of the aisle to help get something passed to keep this nation going, they want to chastise you. They want to demonize you. And I've gained a pretty good amount of respect for him. And I met him in the airport. Yeah. That is a big fellow.
Well, one of our founders gave us a clear warning.
Sure did.
A day or two ago, a guy named Ben Franklin. And
just a couple days ago.
Yeah, a lady, and there's
Mrs. Powell.
Yeah, she asked him, what have you given us coming out of the constitutional meeting when they had the convention, whatever, in Philadelphia? And he said, a republic if you can keep it. And I think that people, I don't know if they really understand what he's saying there. In my view, he's saying that if you don't take personal responsibility for your government and what happens, then we're doomed.
That's
and you're going to
absolutely
lose
right.
it. And I think that is true today, more so maybe than even back then. But he understood that. But
He sure did.
And I think Fetterman may understand that, but I don't see too many Democrats grasping that.
I think Fetterman's looking for solutions. And you go back to when they did the Constitutional Convention, and they put that together, the amount of fighting going back and forth, and we almost didn't have a constitution. And this country would have been a bunch of just individual state nations. And when Mrs. Powell asked him, "Sir, what did you give us? What form of government did you give us?" And he said, "A constitutional republic, if you can keep it."
If you can keep
He
it.
knew it was going to be a messy process. They knew that. And we can look at what's going on today. You can look back, at all the elections, and they're a messy process. But yet that system is the one that's been duplicated around the globe in countries that have liberty and freedoms like we do, and they're starting to recede because they are messy, and there is work in there, and you do have to have a well-educated electorate
Absolutely. And,
with morals.
And here's the thing that I want to ask you too, Ted. So, we're talking about how we got here and what can we do. But these people, these state workers, and this is hard to imagine, but these state workers in Minnesota are to the left of Tim Walz.
That's a pretty scary thought.
I mean, so you wonder whether we're going to be able to reconcile our differences.
Well, I think that quote you had from that lady where she says, "What do they expect me to do? If I go back to work, it's going to be gut-wrenching. I'm going to have to get child care. I'm going to have to do these things.
And I'm going to have to go on public assistance.
Yeah, public assistance. And I don't think that's too much to ask people to show up. I mean, realistically, 50% of your time, you ought to be thankful. I just don't understand that mindset. And we can't go on that way. And I think people are going to wake up to that and say, you know what, this is not going to work. We need to get back together. We need to get working and make this country stronger on that.
Well, we're about to take a commercial break, but before I do, I want to leave you with this kind of thought, and we'll come back and talk about it some. That, going back to what we did on Saturday with that demonstration at the Tesla dealership and hearing what these Minnesota state workers are saying and hearing what the left in general and what Ray Dalio talked about.
Right.
We did a show about whether we're at a point to where we can't do anything but a civil war. It made me think about that movie Independence Day. And, when the actual aliens attacked us and we unified as a world behind that. I hope that doesn't come to pass, but that might be what it takes for us to come together as a people to have some kind of common enemy, because right now it just doesn't seem like there's any common ground between the hardcore left and people like you and me that I think are reasonable.
You would think that people would realize what we have. I mean, you've got our history. You look at 9/11, how people came together. Whenever there's a crisis, we come together as Americans. But it shouldn't take that. It should be waking up every morning, realizing what we have in this country. I mean, just look around what we have and compare it to another country. And we are so blessed in here. And it just pains me that people can't see that. On the other side, they think everything's being taken away from them, and it's really not. We're trying to preserve it for future generations.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a commercial break. If you'd like to be a part of our show as sponsors, look at that tag you see up there where it says Contact Freddie. We'd love to have you be a sponsor of our show and also, support our sponsors. So we'll take this commercial break and we'll be right back.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company.
Shoot GTR.
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Or that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle the truth.
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's going to come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. Wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
Well, like President Trump, we're back, baby. So appreciate you tuning in.
That's right.
If you're just tuning in to us, we're live every Monday from here from Spurs Gridiron Grill.
In the museum.
In
Look
the
around
museum.
here.
Check it out. If you haven't been here, it's incredible, and the food is off the charts. And then on Fridays, we go live from our various homes. So we appreciate people tuning in. Well, we've been talking about, Ted, about this chasm, if you will, between the left and the right, and the hardcore left just doesn't seem to be any common ground to me. And I want to talk to you about a little bit of a story that does show that in some ways you can find common ground. And this is a very unlikely source to come out and say anything positive about Donald Trump. But as the old saying goes, Jesse Jackson said, keep hope alive. So I don't think he meant this, but I'm trying to keep hope alive, man. If you haven't seen this, so this is where you can use the New York Post as our go-to story here. But anti-Trump UAW, United Auto Workers president, backs tariffs on foreign-made cars, said they could bring work back in very short order. So Sean Fain on Sunday, the UAW worker who worked hard against Trump. Now apparently,
I know him well.
Apparently, well, you can tell us about that in just a second. That apparently a lot of UAW members actually voted for Donald Trump, but this guy was really anti-Trump. But he's actually sounding a lot like the president. But you have a story about Mr. Fain. Let's hear your experience.
I followed him. I don't know him personally, but I followed him. He called for the union strike for the United Auto Workers, and there was 3 of them that struck, 3 union companies, GM, Ford, and what's the other one? It wasn't Chrysler. It's
whatever they call him, Chrysler
Sterling
now.
or something like that. And they had amazing results. They got like a 40% pay increase, extra benefits, more retirement. And he brought them back to work. They didn't get what they wanted, but they got close to it. And he goes, this is not over. We're going to strike nationwide. All unions, he's calling to strike nationwide in 2028. And I just think this is way over the board. You know, when you look at what they're making, and then you look at the unions in Minnesota that don't even want to go back to work half the time, does anybody think this is sustainable? I heard somebody once describe a union in the modern day. In the old days, it was needed. In the modern day, it's like a organism destroying its host, and you know it's going to kill everything, and it can't go on. And the neat thing with the tariffs, when Trump put the tariffs on the automobiles, is to increase manufacturing here. And this is where foreign policy and trade policies really play into everyday life. If you go back to NAFTA, when Ross Perot was running, he says if NAFTA goes through, that sucking sound you hear will be jobs leaving America. Look at the textile industries in the Carolinas, in the southeast over there, in that part of the country. And then you look at the manufacturing in Detroit that went to Mexico and other countries, China, things like that. And so the effect that Trump is doing now, it seems disruptive. It may cost a little bit more to get a car, but you're going to see manufacturing and jobs created here that we haven't seen in a long, long time. And that's going to be a big boom to the economy.
Absolutely. Well, your buddy, Mr. Fain, the United Auto Workers president, said Sunday that President Trump looming 25% tariff on foreign-made cars could swiftly boost American manufacturing jobs, which I think is clearly true. But, you know, President Trump is coming under a lot of heat from even segments that are supposedly conservative about the tariffs. But Fain went on to say, we have excess capacity at manufacturing plants. They could bring work back in a very short order.
That would be a real short order. I mean, that would change within 6 months to a year to create these manufacturing. And you're already seeing companies and countries dumping billions of dollars in this. The Saudi Arabia, from what I understand, is doing a $1 trillion investment in America. Taiwan with Taiwan Semiconductor, $800 billion. And you're going to see this over and over again with these countries coming in here and these companies reshoring here in America, repatriating here in America. And it's going to be good for our economy. It'll be good for jobs. And, you know, this is really a change that has had to happen.
Well, you know, Mr. Fain is sounding a lot like President Trump, right? And so we have
for the time being.
Yeah, it's interesting bedfellows here, so to speak. So first you got Tampon Tim apparently sounding like President Trump, telling people to go back to work, and that president of the Minnesota Employees Union essentially comparing Tim to President Trump. Now you got the UAW president sounding like Trump. So my question is, who is next? And I'm wondering if this, we're going to play a little video here. I'm wondering, could this lady here be the next person to sound like President Trump? Check it out.
So closely to find those who were born here and their parents were undocumented. Maybe I ought to first look at Melania. We don't know whether or not her parents were documented.
So I don't know about Mad Max going to sound like Trump. She's calling for Melania to be deported. And, of course, we famously know that she said to go basically harass anytime you see anybody like you and me everywhere we go. But I don't expect her to come around anytime soon. But it's amazing how some of these people are starting to sound a little bit like Donald Trump. What does that mean?
It's just scary to even try to think what Miss Waters is thinking. That's just a hateful woman. And to say the things she did about Melania, how, you know, we need to deport her. I mean, she's a naturalized citizen, and she came here the right way, legally, and she's just talking ignorance is what she's talking, and spewing hatred.
Yeah, and the thing people tend to forget about Melania Trump is she was mega successful before she ever met Donald Trump.
Very well educated, speaks 5 languages, and
yeah, she's an amazing person.
I'm struggling with English.
She's an amazing person in her own right. But have you got any Mad Max stories? I mean, did you ever really have any I know you have some AOC stories, but what about Mad Max?
AOC was a protege of her. The only thing I can say about Miss Waters is every time I met her, whether it was in the airport or that, she had that scowl on her face, like she was just angry. And, you know, you feel bad for people like that, because to go through life in America feeling that way is just not a healthy thing. And then when they were in the majority, it was more spiteful, you know, because they had the power. I remember before I got into Congress, she was talking about nationalizing the petroleum companies. So she wanted to nationalize the petroleum companies and get away from capitalism and free markets and things like that. And it's, again, you put people like that in power, this country will change. And that's why it's important to show up for this election tomorrow, the special election, and
absolutely
make sure that we stay on this path.
Yeah, well, I want to make something clear because I don't want to be over the top thinking that the Mr. Fain, the UAW president, is supporting Trump, because he's not. And this is something he said while he was praising the tariffs. He said, this is what the UAW president said, it doesn't do any good if they're going to locate them in places that are not, talking about new factories, I suppose, going to have the opportunity to have a union, you know. And so naturally we have concerns. So to me, that kind of shows that TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, is real. So you, on the one hand, you're saying that President Trump is doing the right thing for union workers, but on the other hand, you're not going to support him, and you're going to actually collectively work against him. I don't.
Well, if he can get what he wants and get those manufacturers to come here and unionize them, remember what I said, his goal for 2028 is to have all unions go on strike. I mean, those guys are making $45 to $65 an hour now. You compare that across the board, how can anybody afford that in this country to buy the products that they create? And we're getting that farther and farther divide, as Ray Dalio talked about, between the upper income levels and the lower. And I think he said 60% of the people in America were just struggling to get by. And if you keep getting unions that get stronger and stronger, and they have that kind of clout where they can shut down the economy, their wages go up. That creates that divide more and more in this country.
Well, we already kind of mentioned this, but I want to get specific into it. So tomorrow, I guess, is April Fool's Day, but to me, the most significant.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So be careful out there. But the next day, Wednesday, is the day that Trump is going to implement the 25% tariffs on places like Canada and Mexican goods, what he calls his reciprocal tariffs. What are your thoughts on tariffs in general, and what the president's plan is?
Tariffs is a way to balance trade, and it should be used to do that. What I'd like to say or see is countries, like if we negotiate with the EU or any other country, say we've got this trade discrepancy, you're putting this kind of a tariff on us. Some of the countries have 200% on some products. Let's bring those down to where you're not charging us, we're not charging you, and it's going to be over, say, a 2 or 4 year period of time. Do it within that administration and get that kind of a buy-in from your ally countries and even the ones that are maybe adversaries, but do it more methodical, I think, and just say we're going to slap this on there. The other thing is, this kind of ties into some of the sanctions that we do. We use sanctions, where we use them so often they almost lose their effectiveness on another country, because they're like, oh, the Americans are sanctioning us again, and they have all these ways that they can work around that underhandedly. And I think it's a tool that should be used sparingly, but it should be enforced strongly.
Well, that's one thing. You mentioned sanctions, and I started thinking immediately about the Ukraine war. Mm-hmm. And President Trump has articulated this extremely well, that back when he was the president the first time around, that the Europeans, they oppose all these sanctions on Russia, but then they turn around and buy their oil from them. Really, the European Union has been financing Putin's war against Ukraine all along.
They really have, and we talked about that when I was in Congress on Foreign Affairs. And I don't like to tell anybody how to live their life. And when Nord Stream 2 was going to come out, and the European Union was going to get their energy from there, Russia has already cut off energy in the past, 5 years ago, and reduced the flow of that. And he had an excuse why they did that. So it put prices in the EU for electricity and heating. It drove that price up astronomical. And for them to say, well, we're going to buy more from them, I'm like, well, you know what? You make your own bed, and you're going to have to deal with the consequences. And they're waking up to that, and you can tell that by the amount of money Germany is putting into their defense production. And I think it's the total will be close to €1 trillion. €1 trillion. It's unbelievable.
I just was thinking about this as you were talking about that. Can you imagine? I mean, it's great that President Trump has been reelected, in from 45 to 47. But can you imagine where we would be if Donald Trump had not come on the scene? Because here you have with the European Union basically funding the war with Ukraine. Donald Trump warned them about that, and yet they continue to do it. And you see it all over the place that they're continuing to basically pay for their own destruction. So it's just
they really were, you know,
it's
and
just
they're
amazing.
They're funneling money to the people that are going to be their biggest threat and adversary, and that's Putin right now. But China's not far away. I mean, China's just sitting back, watching these other countries fight each other and go after this. And you know, I think it got Xi's attention to see Germany come out that strong on building their military. And again, that's a sign of times that are going on in this world. We haven't seen this since World War II, this kind of disruption, and there's a tectonic shift in world powers that is being played out right in front of us. And let's hope that calmer heads prevail. I can't imagine what would happen had Biden or Harris would have won. What would be going on right now? It's kind of scary to think. I think Ukraine would be over. You know, Russia would have all that, and I think Taiwan would have been taken by now. But with Trump back in there and being unpredictable and willing to put sanctions, willing to put tariffs on there and enforce those, I think it gives pause to a lot of people like we better have another strategy here and tread lightly.
Well, I also think what it shows is the dishonesty of the mainstream media and why people need to watch shows like ours. I can join our pirate ship.
Because
come
on.
You get
got plenty of room.
You get the truth here, because think about this, Ted. They labeled Donald Trump as a puppet of Putin, a Putin pocket puppet or whatever. When Donald
Can
Trump
you say that many times fast?
Yeah, Donald Trump killed Russians. Let's just cut to the chase. Donald Trump killed Russian soldiers in Syria.
He sure did.
Bombed them, bombed their air bases, but he's in the pocket of Putin. It makes no sense. While the Europeans were paying for the war that is killing Ukrainians, it's just unbelievable. If you listen to the
by
mainstream,
buying their fuel from Russia.
Yeah, you listen to the mainstream media and you would not understand that at all. It's just insane. But
something else that's coming out of this is, and I think this is something that ought to concern everybody, is there is a disruption in South Korea politics. President Yoon, he got arrested, and he'll probably go to jail. You know, a lot of the presidents from South Korea wind up committing suicide or they go to jail. And so there's disruption over there. They're one of our strongest allies over there. And so if this continues, and you see North Korea sending their soldiers to Russia, they have never been out of their country. Now they're getting fighting experiences, which is going to bolster their military and prepare it to invade South Korea. This is something that's on the horizon.
Yeah,
and again,
I saw they're just sending a whole group
another
more.
3,000 over there, and I think 4,000 have been killed. And it's a tough situation in the world right now, and that's why politics matter and foreign affairs matter, and we need to make sure we get our house in order so that we can lead the world. Not that we want to lead it, but I think we're best equipped to do that with the right policies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, you've mentioned quite a bit. We talked about the special elections coming up in Florida, but I know you're always talking about the midterm elections, which are, people think, oh, they're way off, but really the campaigns for those start right now. So I wanted to cover this story. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but my question kind of is like California. Is California ever going to wake up? I know they turned around and voted in the higher numbers for President Trump this last time around, but is California ever going to wake up? I want to give you a few examples. I don't know if you saw this. I'm using New York Post
look over at your computer
as a template. Laws, you know, they had the big fires out there, right? And one of them at the place where 7,000 homes, some people say as much as 10,000, burned to the ground in Pacific Palisades. How many of the homes do you think how many building permits has LA issued to rebuild those 7,000 homes? You have any idea?
Probably none.
4.
Is that all?
4.
I remember Karen Bass saying, well, we can't clean this mess up because we have to get the permits to even start. And, you know, Trump was out there and saying, no, you need to start tomorrow.
Yeah, so 4 permits. I mean, think about the
4 permits.
The devastation that's happened here in Florida and how Governor DeSantis has responded to it with the hurricanes. Can you imagine like an area like St. Pete, Tampa, where they had all that damage, and other places that if they'd only issued 4 permits?
Wow.
I mean, think about this. People don't know when DeSantis was trying to get the cleanup done down there.
Yeah.
The Hillsborough County would not allow the trucks to come into their landfill site. Well, Mr. DeSantis, love him, hate him, whatever, he had the highway patrol go down there, push the gate open, and the trucks came in there because people needed relief. So
yeah, I mean, you just get to the common sense where we've got to do this. I know you don't want this, but at some point you just got to do it. And Governor DeSantis did a good job on that. And I think, Gavin Newsom, he needs to just do what's right for the citizens of his state and get these permits, fast track them. And any leader would do that, and Karen Bass ought to be working with him instead of fighting all this stuff. And, of course, they're going to worry about DEI and make sure all these contracts go out and they're balanced, through across the board. But at this point in time, you need to waive a lot of that and just get the work done.
Yeah, and here's another example of why California should change. This is from ABC News. U.S.-Mexican border down at Tijuana area, the river down there. Mexico has dumped over 100 billion gallons, that's with a B, of toxic sewage that is coming into San Diego area. Listen to this. Imperial Beach Mayor Paloma Aguirre told ABC News that South San Diego County is in a total state of emergency related to this transboundary pollution. And this is a public health ticking time bomb. She said, we are living in conditions that, quote, nobody in this great nation should be living in. And I say,
21st
amen.
century, yeah.
But are they ever going
Anytime.
to change what they do?
Well, again, there goes sanctions and other things like this. And, there's an agreement we have with Mexico in the Southwest states, on water rights. When they're low on water, we ship water in. But when we're low on water, they're supposed to ship it in, and they weren't doing it. Now they're dumping these toxic chemicals and waste into our aquifer or in our water channels. And, this is where hardball comes, and diplomacy does come into play here, and it does have an effect. And I can't think of a better person than the Trump administration going in there and with Lee Zeldin with the EPA, cracking down on this. And the whole thing is, we're not trying to deny you the reciprocal nature of trade, but we don't want you to cheat us too. I had this conversation with several of their foreign ministers and their ambassador on trade. We can talk about another time. And, if we're going to be good allies and neighbors, we need to treat each other with respect like that.
One more quick example of why California should wake the heck up and change.
You think?
This is your good buddy Gavin Newsom, man. Our podcast competitor, so to speak. We should beat him every time. But Gavin Newsom came out and is requesting a loan now. This is a loan of $2.8 billion to address the bloated deficits of state's Medicare program, and that's on top of the $3.4 billion loan that's already been granted. And pretty much all of this is to take care of illegal immigrants in their sanctuary.
Do you see any connections there? Do you see any connections from the last administration allowing all these people? And we knew this was going to happen, and we talked about this. And, this is what happens when you get people that don't stand up for this country. And, yes, we want people to have health care all over the world, but, not at the expense of the American taxpayers. Let's work with their governments to have their governments do what's right for their people, not us paying for it.
So, yeah, like the examples, I just asked that, and I'm picking on California because the Democrats, they always talk about they're going to flip Texas and make sure. Well, we need to turn around and flip California. But I would ask you, if you're out there in California, please chime in on our show. If $8 billion basically of your tax money is being used to furnish health care to illegal immigrants, are you going to change your vote? If 100 billion gallons of sewage is dumped on your doorstep in San Diego, are you going to change your vote? If you only permit 4 out of 7 to 10,000 homes to be rebuilt in LA, and that's just in one area, What is it going to take, California, to wake up and really, you don't have to love Donald Trump, but my God, the people you're supporting are running your life into the ground.
They really are. It reminds you of Bill Inwall on the comedy tour, like, here's your sign.
You can't fix stupid, right?
You can't fix it. And, to see Gavin Newsom pivoting and almost becoming a moderate is a scary thing, in fact. Just because that's not who he is, but he'll do anything he can to get in power. And let's hope that Tim Walz partners up with Beto O'Rourke, who I came in with, and I think he's a billionaire. His family is, his wife's family, and just far left-wing progressive. And let's put AOC in there, too, and that's a great ticket that will never get elected.
Well, Gavin Newsom, we'll close out the thing on this, and I'll do my Gavin Newsom impression. He's always doing this right here. But Gavin Newsom,
that pretty well.
The one thing he has not done is apologize for any of his policies. He's criticized the Democrats and stuff like that, but he's not taken personal responsibility, which is a big thing we need to do as Americans, take personal responsibility. Well, Ted, I've enjoyed doing the show with you. I hope out there in TV land, so to speak, you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed giving it to you. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, everybody root the Gators, root for them. They're going to win the national championship. We're going to make it happen. We're going to bring it into existence. And don't forget to vote. April 1st, tomorrow, Randy Fine, District 6, Jimmy Petronas, District 1. And we'll keep the Make America Great momentum going strong. And the golden days of America are right here in front of us now, but they're going to get better.
What he said. Peace out.
Take care. Thank you, John.
Yep.